The last 3 centuries. In 2053, worsening conditions in the world's climate led to the first global economic conference. It was agreed to implement measures intended to reverse industrial damage to the ecology and replenish the ozone layer. By 2061, an array of weather control satellites were in orbit. For added efficiency and as a mark of worldwide cooperation, these were placed under the control of a supercomputer network called Gaia, the Global Artificial Intelligence Array. The Earth's climate began to show steady improvement. The first hint of disaster came early in 2067, when Gaia shut down inexplicably for a period of 17 minutes. Normal operation was resumed, but the system continued to suffer glitches. One such glitch resulted in Paris being subjected to a 2-day heat wave of such intensity that the pavements cracked. After several months, the fault was identified. A computer virus had been introduced into Gaia by unknown means. The system's designer began programming an antivirus, but died before his work was complete. The crisis grew throughout that year until finally, following the death of 5,000 people in a flash flood along the Bangladesh coastline, the Gaia project was officially denounced. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to shut it down. By the mid-21st century, global weather conditions were in chaos owing to Gaia's sporadic operation. Ice sheets advanced further each year. Australia was subject to virtually constant torrential rain. The center of Asia had become an arid wasteland. The political situation reflected the ravages of the climate, with wars flaring continually around the globe. Late in 2084, computer scientists in London tried to hack into Gaia and locate the replicating viruses in the program. Gaia, detecting this, interpreted the action as an attack on its program and retaliated by taking over a range of defense networks, which allowed it to launch a nuclear strike. London was completely destroyed. By the end of the century, Gaia had routed itself into all major computer networks, taking control of weather, communications, and weapons systems all across the planet. Periods of lucidity and hospitable climate were interspersed with hurricanes and Arctic blizzards. The US president gave an interview in which he likened Gaia to a living entity. She was intended as mankind's protective mother, but this mother has gone mad. Spiraling decline in the world's fortunes left much of humanity on the brink of extinction. The population fell rapidly until only a few million people remained scattered around the globe, mostly in cities where food could still be artificially produced. It is now the year 2300. The rich stand aloof, disporting themselves with forced gaiety and waiting for the end. The poor inhabit jostling slums where disease is rife and law is unknown. Between the cities, the land lies under a blanket of snow and ice. No one expects humanity to last another century. This is truly the end of history. Now choose your character for the adventure. Learn about one of these characters. The Explorer. Skill. You have chosen to play as the Explorer. Others might mourn the collapse of civilization, but for you, it only opens up new areas of mystery in the world. You can continue to the prologue or skip directly to Chapter 1. Prologue. The Etruscan Inn lies in the shadow of the Apennine Mountains, beside a frozen waterfall, sheltered from the wind by a high ridge of bare black rock. You stand at a long window and gaze out towards the mountains. Dusk is melting the sharp outlines of the crags, filling the valleys with blue gloom. The moon glimmers faintly under racing black clouds. Later this evening, there will be more snow. Turning from the window, you let the curtain fall back and make your way across the dingy room. Travelers sit at the sides, noisily gambling and sipping hard liquor the color of fire. Many are hunters and traders from the plains which slope down from here to the Ligurian Sea. Others may have been here much longer, thin old men and women who found meager employment. The Etruscan Inn is a famous stopover for those who undertake the perilous Apennine crossing. If a few such, gazing up at the ice-capped peaks, found their spirits daunted and chose to stay, who can blame them? You sometimes wonder yourself why you bother to press on across the world in the teeth of such hardship and poverty. The story of how the inn came to be here is a strange one, even for these bizarre times. The building was originally an air cruiser which crashed in the mountains 200 years ago. An ancestor of the present innkeeper turned the wreckage into a hostelry for wayfarers. The power unit had not been damaged in the crash, so the inn has electricity, a rarity in the modern world. Even better, several of the air cruiser's caretechs were salvaged. These are robots which continually clean and repair the structure, sturdily carrying out the tasks they were programmed to do centuries ago. You can look around the inn, learn about its history, or move on to the next room. Pushing aside a drape, you step into another room. On the wall, the screen flickers with scenes from an old film. The innkeeper is sitting with a few others at the back, loudly commenting on the action. You step over a caretech which resembles a long metal cockroach. It extends polishing pads to clean the floor where you were standing. Propping yourself against the wall, you watch the film for a few minutes, but the innkeeper's shouts and jeers are impossible to ignore. When you complain, he only gives a great gusting laugh and says, "There's no point in getting interested in any film that appears on this screen." The video link comes from a satellite connected to Gaia, who changes channels as the whim strikes her. Sometimes I have seen newsreel footage over a century old. At other times there are films, musical shows or documentaries. But I have yet to see the end of any program. There! He points at the screen and, turning, you see that the film has been replaced by a blizzard of gray static. You can listen to other patrons, wait for the night to fall, or watch the screens. "Turn it off, can't you?" growls a man from the adjacent room. "Some of us would like to get to sleep." "Turn it off, you say?" The innkeeper bellows with laughter at this. "It hasn't been off in all the time I've been alive. It can't be turned off, not unless Gaia decides to take pity on us and give us a few hours' peace." An angrily florid-faced man stamps through from the other room and glowers at the screen, which has now changed to show a weather report for the coming month. "Preposterous!" he snarls in outrage. "It says New York will be having thunderstorms. There has been no rain in New York for years. It is buried under half a mile of ice." The innkeeper only chuckles and goes about his chores. "Don't blame me," he says. "Everyone knows Gaia is mad." The man whose rest was disturbed glares after him and protests. "If you can't turn it off, why not smash the screen? It only shows gibberish anyhow." Seeing the man step forward as if to do just that, the innkeeper wags a finger at him. "I'd advise you to leave it as it is. Stick wads of wool in your ears if the noise disturbs you. But if you smash the screen, the caretechs will spend the whole night repairing it, and none of us will get any sleep, what with their scuttling about and the clattering of spare parts." Hearing this, the man throws up his arms in exasperation and, gathering his blankets, stomps off to sleep at the far end of the inn. You can listen to other patrons, wait for the night to fall, or watch the screens. Night falls. The drunken roistering turns to low murmurs, then snores. You huddle on your own bedding and listen to the moaning of the wind outside the fuselage. Tomorrow you have to set out again into the cold. It is not a pleasant prospect. From the adjacent room, you can hear the screen crackling with incessant babble. There is part of a game show probably taped before your great-grandfather was born, followed by clips from science fiction films of the 21st century. You are thirsty and you cannot sleep. Ignoring the mumbled complaints of the people stretched out around you, you get up and step over them, moving through to the room where the screen is. You can listen to other patrons, wait for the night to fall, or watch the screens. Maybe a half hour of random videos will cure your insomnia. Then the screen changes. It is a news report from the year 2125. The main item concerns the crash of an air cruiser in the Apennine Mountains. You sit forward in your seat, intrigued. Pictures taken from the air reveal the broken tangle of wreckage that was later repaired to form this inn. Suddenly, the picture changes. In another item today, says the announcer's voice, scientists studying the meteor that fell in Egypt last month say that it may be the oldest object in the universe. These pictures show the safety suits that are needed to approach the meteor, which emits radiation of a type never previously identified. The scene flickers to a date months later. A reporter is standing at a roadside, an armored truck blazing in the background. Terrorists of the sect known as the Valentine Watchers today seized the mysterious meteor as it was being transported to Cairo for further tests. The terrorists, who worship the meteor which they call the Heart of Volant, have yet to issue a statement. The screen crackles again, becoming a rich green color with the outline of the world's continents in red. The continents as they looked before the sea level fell and the polar caps crept down to cover them. A warm, feminine voice speaks. The Heart of Volant remained in the hands of the cultists for 20 years. They founded the city of Douane in the Sahara and learned how to tap the heart's power, which they used to devastating effect in the Paradox War. Later, Douane suffered civil war and became abandoned. I have now completed analysis of the scientific tests carried out before the heart was seized by the cultists. These are my findings. If a sentient creature were to make direct physical contact with the heart, this would release the full energy stored within. The effect would be to activate that creature's total psychic potential. In effect, they would gain ultimate power over their surroundings. This has been a communication from Gaia. Thank you for your attention. The screen goes blank and silent for a moment, then starts to show a cartoon. You hardly notice it. You are too awestruck by the realization that you have just heard the voice of Gaia. What she said begins to sink in. Ultimate power. It lies somewhere in the ruined city of Douane, across the Saharan ice wastes. Suddenly wary, you look at the sleeping forms stretched out around the room. Did anyone else hear Gaia's broadcast? You listen to the snores, the drone of slow, regular breathing. No one shows any sign of being awake. Plunged in thought, you return to your blanket and stretch out, but now sleep is even harder to come by. When you finally doze off just a few hours before dawn, your dreams are filled with images of the strange meteor from space and the power that it contains. Will you go to Douane and seek the heart? Are you tempted by a power that could change the whole world? If so, turn to Chapter 1. Chapter 1, bookmarked. You are packed and ready to leave the inn at dawn. Cold gray light seeps in through the row of dusty portholes at the side of the common room. Making your way to the door, you find the innkeeper polishing the antique Formica desk. Seeing you set your pack down beside the door, he comes over and kicks away one of the caretechs which had its metal body pressed down across the door sill. You're lucky having those, you say, pushing the door open a crack to take a breath of fresh, icy air. The innkeeper grunts as he watches the caretech reorient itself and glide away across the floor. They are a mixed blessing, since they insist on trying to repair the inn to the form it had originally. This door is a feature that I added myself, more convenient than the hatchway at the back of the fuselage. But if I leave it unattended for more than a few hours at a time, those wretched caretechs always try to weld it shut. You smile to show that you sympathize. I'd be grateful for some advice. I'm now traveling on to the Sahara. What is the best route? The innkeeper flings the door wide, ignoring the curses that erupt from his customers at the sudden intrusion of cold air. Gazing across the expanse of dazzling white snow, he says, the most obvious course would take you to Venice, where you could board the ferry for Kahira, and yet he rubs his hands, blowing out a long furrow of steam in the chill air. Myself, I'd be tempted to go instead through the Lyonesse jungle, just to savor a bit of warmth in this frigid world. Thence across the Gibraltar and the Atlas Mountains, unless you stumbled across the ruins of lost Marseille, of course, in which case you might even find a tube tunnel to take you straight to the Sahara. Thanking the innkeeper for his advice, you indicate that you are ready to pay your bill. He looks at you in surprise and points to a small, dapper man in a gray-trimmed white snowsuit. Your friend there has already paid. At this, the small man comes over and extends his hand, smiling broadly. Hello. My name is Kyle Bosch. I believe we're traveling in the same direction. If you accept Kyle Bosch as your companion on the road, turn to Chapter 23. If you tell him that you prefer to travel alone, turn to Chapter 45. Chapter 23. I overheard you say you were bound for the Saharan ice waste, says Bosch. My own journey takes me in that direction. As you set off together through the deep drifts of snow, Bosch takes your arm and points to a row of black wooden posts. That is the road to Venice. We can catch the ferry from there to Kahira. If you agree to go east of Venice, turn to Chapter 200. If you'd rather go west through the Lyonesse jungle, as the innkeeper recommended, turn to Chapter 177. Chapter 200, bookmarked. Record the code word diamond on your character sheet. Your journey takes you up into the mountains, where the days are dull under a leaden sky and the nights are filled with swirling snow. You subsist on a few rations brought with you from the inn, but these are quickly used up. Too quickly. You must reach an inhabited area soon or else starve. Forcing your way bent-backed against a glacial wind, you are traversing a narrow pass when you catch sight of a human figure on a ledge up ahead. Your cries of greeting are ignored, and the figure is hidden for a moment behind a veil of snow. Hurrying forward, you discover several other figures, but none are glad to see you. They are beyond any emotion, in fact, being long dead and frozen into rigid statues by the cold. If you go closer to investigate, turn to Chapter 264. Chapter 264. Bosch scrambles up to the ledge and goes through the pockets of one of the corpses. I don't like robbing the dead, but there might be some food, he mutters. If you have roguery, turn to Chapter 328. If not, but you have paradoxing and a psionic focus, turn to Chapter 370. If you have neither, turn to Chapter 306. Chapter 306. Bosch shudders as he looks along the row of dead white faces. There are at least 10 corpses here in the pass, some on this ledge and others perched further along among the rocks. They must have climbed up onto the ledge to get away from wolves, says Bosch. And these people were not cowering from predators when they died. In every case, they are frozen in postures that suggest curiosity. Poised, peering out from the ledge, lines of amazement stamped on their faces, icicles across their wide eyes. Death did not surround them with slavering jaws, but stole up softly like a thief in the night. The sky is fading from gray to black. If you press on now, you will have to spend the night in open country, unprotected from the bitter wind. If you choose to do that, turn to Chapter 285. If you shelter here in the pass, turn to Chapter 349. Chapter 349. Finding another ledge where there are no corpses, you sweep it clear of snow and settle down for the night. Bosch casts a wry gaze along the rock face. A bit like sleeping in a graveyard, he remarks. You can only shrug. Try not to think about it. At least here we're out of the wind and safe from predators. Are we, you wonder? As the feeble daylight gives way tonight, snow comes in fast flurries on the wind coursing through the pass. The sound is like a banshee's wailing. Huddled in your jacket, you try to get to sleep. Then you hear the unmistakable tread of footsteps in the snow. Someone is coming. If you have ESP and a psionic focus, turn to chapter 392. If not, but you have lore, turn to chapter 413. If neither, you can leap out and attack. Turn to chapter 433. Or wait where you are, turn to chapter 2. Chapter 413. Peering along the pass, you catch sight of a hunched, shambling figure in the snow-clouded darkness. It is thin, with a large, hooded head. It is still too far away for you to get a clear view of its face, but something about it stirs atavistic fears at the back of your mind. You glance suddenly at the rigid corpses on the other ledge. All were entranced, turned to hypnotized statues before they froze to death. By Gaia, you seize Bosch's arm. We're in the larder of the Gorgon. Turn to chapter 433. Chapter 433. If you have shooting and a charged Barisal gun, turn to chapter 68. If you wish to use roguery, turn to chapter 24. If you resort to cunning, turn to chapter 46. If you have none of those skills, turn to chapter 2. Chapter 2. The figure emerges from the darkness like a ghost. It is wrapped in a rough cape of stitched furs, its shriveled frame sprouting a spindly neck which supports a large, soft head like a leather bag. Pushing back its hood, it reveals a hideous face dominated by a single glowing eye on a flexible stalk. Bosch scrambles to the side of the ledge and then freezes, mesmerized by the creature's eye. The stalk swivels, turning the lethal gaze towards you. If you have agility, turn to chapter 112. Otherwise, it is too late to act, and you are plunged into a hypnotic trance from which you will never recover. Your life and adventure have come to an end. You have encountered a new story moment, a mundane death. Introduction. Learn about the bounty hunter. Skills. You have chosen to play as Myself, I'd be tempted to go instead through the Lyonnese jungle, just to savor a bit of warmth in this frigid world. Thence across the Gibraltar and the Atlas Mountains. Unless you stumbled across the ruins of lost Marseille, of course, in which case you might even find a tube tunnel to At this, the small man comes over and extends. Chapter 45. You look at Bosch's hand but do not take it. In these latter days, with humanity on the brink of extinction, you have learned to be wary of strangers. I travel alone. Bosch is not deterred. Come, that's hardly friendly. I've paid your bill. I did not ask you to. Landlord, return this man's money. I shall settle my own account. Your bill for the night is 3 scads. You have 30 scads. If you are willing to pay this, amend your money and turn to chapter 67. If you reconsider and accept Bosch's generosity, turn to chapter 23. Chapter 67. Taking up your pack, you trudge out into the snow. Moments later, you hear the crunching of rapid footsteps, and Bosch catches up with you. His breath curls into the diamond-clear morning air. We may as well travel together for mutual convenience, At least for a while, he says chirpily. If you agree to this, turn to chapter 133. If you refuse point blank, turn to chapter 155. Chapter 155. Why won't you see sense? Asks Bosch in an affable tone. Two can travel more safely than one. The road is plagued by robbers. You find Bosch's sincerity to be as false as a serpent's smile, and you have no desire to wake up one morning to find he has made off with your money and provisions. For all I know, you are the robber, you tell him to his face. Before you can come up with an answer to this, you slog off through the snow. Now you must decide your route. Will you head east to Venice, where you may be able to get passage to Kahira? Turn to chapter 139. Or will you follow the innkeeper's advice and go? Chapter 139, bookmarked. You ascend into the mountains across stark rocky ridges like the broken backs of colossal dinosaurs. The sun shines as feebly as a flashlight seen through a thick pane of ice. When the wind gusts into your face, it is so cold that you can hardly draw breath. On the second day, you come upon four figures also trudging eastwards. They are several hundred meters ahead on the surface of a glacier. As you hurry to catch up, you see patches where the snow has swirled away to reveal the icy surface of the glacier reflecting glints of feeble daylight. The leader of the group is a short, broad-shouldered man, whose dark, sparkling eyes display an easy authority. The other three, apparently his bodyguards, are hulking men whom you take to be of South Pacific origin. It is hard to be sure with the fur hoods drawn so tightly around their faces. The short man shakes hands and introduces himself as Hal Shandor. Our sky car crashed in the hills back there, he explains. We're going on to Venice. Travel with us if you want. If you join their group, turn to chapter 225. If you prefer to journey alone, turn to chapter 161. Chapter 225. The next morning you are overtaken by a blizzard that turns the sky dark as doomsday. Stumbling on, you are barely able to see the others through the thick snowfall. Then a blue flare erupts in the gloom, drawing you to where Shandor stands with two of his bodyguards. He has a sputtering magnesium torch in his hand, which drips hissing fragments of hot metal into the snow. "Where's Goro?" says one of the bodyguards. You all gaze off into the blizzard. No one says a thing until Shandor grabs your sleeve. "We can't do anything for him now," he calls over the shrieking wind. "Come on, there's an ice cave we can shelter in." You follow the others down a crevice in the ground. In the light of Shandor's flare, the walls around you gleam like old blue glass. This is frozen meltwater, you say, running your hand across the smooth ice. We must be on another glacier. "Inside a glacier, you mean," mutters Shandor. Eerie, isn't it? We're safer here than out in that storm, though. You walk along the gallery of ice, overwhelmed by a sense of awe. Perhaps this was a mighty river once, a raging torrent, before the summers died and the ice age took root in the world. Now it slides imperceptibly along at the rate of a few centimeters a year. You see a face in the ice and jump back with a startled cry. Shandor comes over and raises the torch. Frozen just inside the surface of the wall is a man in black military-style overalls, a short sword held in one hand. Perhaps he has been there for centuries, but what makes you shudder is the fact that his eyes are wide open. I could almost fancy he's watching us, you say. "Tell you what I fancy," says Shandor. "That sword he's got." If you chip the body out of the ice, turn to chapter 205. If you just wait until the blizzard is past and then press on, turn to chapter 249. Chapter 205. Shandor's two remaining bodyguards produce small picks with which they hack at the ice. They are strong men and throw themselves into the job tirelessly, but it is soon obvious that the ice is too hard-packed. They remove their fur jackets despite the cold, and one of them, turning to Shandor and wiping beads of sweat out of his eyes, says, "It's going to take us hours to get the body out, boss." Shandor glances at you, then shrugs. Just chip the ice away around the hand, then. Get the sword. It is almost an hour before they have achieved this. By now, the wind has dropped, making just a low, ghastly moan as it gusts along the gully leading down to the cave. Nightfall cannot be more than a couple of hours off. You go over with Shandor and peer at the ice wall, where the picks have gouged down to the corpse's hand. The clear blue ice has become cloudy with white cracks. The hand hangs limply, the short sword still clutched in its fingers. Shandor goes to take it, hesitates, turns to you with a grimace of distaste. I'm not easily spooked, but he gives an embarrassed chuckle. The short sword is of Japanese style, its blade still razor-sharp in spite of a faint speckling of rust. You can take it if you wish, remember to note it on your character sheet if so. If not, one of the bodyguards will claim it. You notice something odd about the corpse's hand. The slight violet bloom to the skin could be attributed to its preservation in ice, but the long index finger and the hair on the palm are not so easy to explain. If you have lore, turn to chapter 183. If not, turn to chapter 270. Chapter 270. You find the missing bodyguard, Goro, lying only 50 meters from the ice cave where you took shelter. He froze to death on his hands and knees, crawling in the teeth of the blizzard. Snow is piled around the body. Ice cakes his features, locked rigid in an expression of stubborn intensity. The other two, who may be his brothers for all you know, betray no emotion at the sight. Of course, they must have realized he couldn't have survived. "Shall we bury him, boss?" says one. Shandor looks at the sky. Dusk is already descending along the edge of the valley, shadows creeping like blots of soot across the crisp white snow. He considers, then gives a curt nod back towards the crevasse. "Toss the body down into the cave. It's as good a tomb as any. I want to be off this glacier by nightfall." After sliding Goro's body down into the crevasse, the four of you trudge on in silence. By the time you crest the shoulder of bare black rock bordering the glacier, stars are beginning to glimmer between the low banks of cloud. Something impels you to glance back. You see the last of the sunlight trickle off the world. In the same instant, a slurry of thick purple steam gushes out of the crack in the ice far behind. You rub your eyes and look again. Now there is nothing. It must have been a trick of the fading light. Shandor's bodyguards have found a spar of rock to give cover from the night winds. They warm it with blasts from their Barisal guns, leaving the rock surface pleasantly warm when you hunker down beside it to eat the rations that Shandor shares out. If you possess the short sword from the body in the ice, turn to chapter 291. If one of the others took it, turn to chapter 312. Chapter 291. You are woken by the touch of fingers on your face. They feel like icicles. You look up, and in the silver luster of the moonlight, you see a man bending over you. You open your mouth to scream, but the only sound you can muster is a stifled croak of dread. It is the same man you saw frozen inside the glacier. You press back against the rock and get your legs under you, slowly sliding to a standing position. The man watches you with an uncanny expression of capricious menace, like a cat confronted with an odd-looking canary. A severed arm lies by your feet in the snow. A head, half buried a short distance off, stares with glazed eyes. You look around in mounting horror. Shandor and his men have been brutally murdered while you slept. The strange man smiles, but not in a human way. He looks like a living shadow. Amazing that he doesn't freeze to death in those thin overalls. His hand comes up, a flicker of ivory in the darkness. "The sword," he murmurs. "My sword. Return it to me." If you have close combat, turn to chapter 398. If you have paradoxing and a psionic focus, turn to chapter 377. If you have shooting and a charged barisal gun, turn to chapter 355. If you have none of these, turn to chapter 419. Chapter 355. A beam of deadly radiation stabs out, striking the mysterious figure full in the chest. His smile does not waver. Although his clothing is burned away, his smooth, pale skin is completely unscathed by the blast. Your arm drops limply to your side as you stare in disbelief. You have never seen anyone survive a direct hit from a barisal gun unless protected by body armor. The look in those silvery eyes confirms what you should have guessed already. This is not a living man you are facing. It is a blood-drinking predator, one of the vampires of ancient myth. Turn to chapter 419. Chapter 419. A terrifying howl erupts from the stranger's throat, rooting you to the spot. You hardly see him move as he closes in and locks his bloodless fingers around your windpipe. You try to wrestle free, but your muscles are slack with fear, and you can only kick feebly as he lifts you clear of the ground and snaps your neck like a farmer killing a chicken. Your lifeblood will nourish the unnatural creature that has slain you. Introduction. You have chosen to play as the bounty hunter. At this, the small man comes. That's Chapter 67. Taking up your. Chapter 155. Why won't you see sense? Asks Bosch in an affable tone. Two can travel more safely than one. The road is plagued by robbers. You find Bosch's sincerity to be as false as a serpent's smile, and you have no desire to wake up one morning to find he has made off with your money and provisions. For all I know, you are the robber, you tell him to his face. Before you can come up with an answer to this, you slog off through the snow. Now you must decide your route. Will you head east to Venice, where you may be able to get passage to Kahira? Turn to chapter 139. Or will you follow the innkeeper's advice and go west through the Lyonesse jungle? Turn to chapter 221. Chapter 139. The short man shakes hands. Chapter 161. You trek wearily onwards, often plunging almost to your waist through fine, powdery banks of snow. The sun pokes feeble rays of light across the bleak sky like an old man clutching for his pills. Quicksilver ribbons lie across the landscape, marking out the course of glaciers through the ridges of rock. Night descends like a sheath of hoarfrost. For days, your ordeal continues as you cross the rugged mountain slopes and finally begin your descent towards the foothills. Lose 3 life points, or 2 life points if you have survival. You have 7 life points left. If still alive, you give a hoarse grunt of relief through frost-numbed lips when the towers and cupolas of Venice finally appear against the skyline. If you have close combat and a short sword, turn to chapter 8. Chapter 334, bookmarked. Dusk is falling by the time you reach the ancient city of Venice. It shimmers with 1,000 lights under a sky like dull green bronze. Hungry and cold, you quicken your pace through the outlying streets. You pass the temporary shacks where hunters and traders dwell, then the slums of corrugated iron and plastic filling the narrow, sunken streets that some say were once canals. Above them loom the blocks of ancient plazas, where the rich and powerful of the city reside in palatial buildings shored up with wooden scaffolding to support them from the ravages of time. You soon learn that the ferry to Kahira is not due for a couple of days. While waiting, you have a choice of where to take lodging. The lavish Marco Polo Hotel will charge 12 scads for 2 nights. The Hotel Paradise will charge 6 scads. The disreputable Doge's Inn will cost only 3 scads. Decide where you are staying and deduct the money. If you choose the Marco Polo and have an ID card, turn to Chapter 222. If you choose the Marco Polo but do not possess an ID card, turn to Chapter 286. If you opt for the Paradise, turn to Chapter 244. If you check in at the Doge's Inn, turn to Chapter 371. Chapter 286. In the hotel bar, you strike up conversation with a tall, slow-eyed woman called Thadra Bey. Her accent tells you she is a native of Alat, the huge space colony in Earth-Moon orbit. I hear that conditions on Alat are vastly better than on Earth, you remark over a glass of Synthash. But perhaps you are down on business? She sips at her drink. What I seek is only available here. On Alat, the science of genetic engineering cannot be practiced for fear of infecting the colony with a deadly plague. Consequently, the only improvements that can be made to the human body are by mechanical means. Your own body appears not to need any improvement, you put in politely. She continues as though you had not spoken. A friend of mine had an implant along her optic nerve so that she could tell the time merely by blinking. The device became stuck permanently on, so that she could not sleep because of seeing lighted numerals in front of her eyes. Worse, it was 3 minutes fast. She finishes her drink, waving away the waiter who tries to refill it. Here on Earth, the body can be enhanced more efficiently using genetic retroviruses. Specifically, I seek a man called Malengan who is said to trade in such things. If you have Streetwise, or Avada Mekam, and want to help her, turn to Chapter 307. If not, turn to Chapter 329. Chapter 307. You give Thadra Bey a contact who should be able to put her in touch with Malengan. This will save me considerable effort, she murmurs, glancing at the name and address you have written out for her. As she carefully burns the paper over a candle flame, she adds, On Alat, we adhere to a principle of equity in business. I must pay you for this information. You wave your hand expansively. It's not necessary. But it is, she speaks firmly. I do not wish to be in your debt. She gives you a packet of antidote pills. We take these while on Earth to protect us from the toxins in the air. They are effective against most diseases and poisons. Keep them. I have more in my room. She gets up and sweeps out of the bar. Note the packet of antidote pills as one of your possessions. Then turn to Chapter 329. Chapter 329. With a day or two to wait until the ferry to Kahira arrives, you have time to make preparations for the adventure ahead. You take a stroll along the esplanade, overlooking the gambling rooms of the notorious Hazard Strip. Below you, in the deep alley that was once the grandest of the canals, glaring neon lights and raucous music intrude on the wistful grandeur of Venice by night. You consider your options. If you want to spend your time trying to communicate with Gaia, turn to Chapter 351. If you want to discover more about the heart of Volant, turn to Chapter 91. If you inquire after travelers who have gone missing on their way to Venice recently, turn to Chapter 451. If you go looking for gossip about Kyle Bosch, turn to Chapter 179. If you try Chapter 91. You piece together a jigsaw of legend, superstition, and historical fact. The heart fell from the sky, an unearthly gemstone that became the focus of a crazed cult. The cult used the heart's miraculous power to wage the Paradox War. Now it lies buried under the ruined city of Duen, and the one who retrieves it will become mightier than any man has ever been. Why, then, did the civilization of Duen fall? You ask a scholar at the library. Its rulers went mad. No one could wield such power and stay sane. Do you know it for a fact, or is it just your own theory? But his only answer to that is a whimsical smile. If you have Streetwise or a Vademecum, turn to chapter 157. If not, but you have lore, turn to chapter 414. If you have neither, turn to chapter 25. Chapter 157. Others are also interested in the story of the heart. A black-caped guide, overhearing your inquiries, follows you down the street, saying, "You're not the first to pass through Venice bound for Duen." Last week there was Janus Gaunt, hiring guides for a trip across the Saharan ice wastes, and only this morning I took a woman of Al-Lat to see Malingen the Jean Genie. Fadra Bey was her name, a veritable Amazon already. Now, thanks to Malingen's potions, she is more than human. Intriguing. If what the guide says is true, the hunt for Duen has become a race. Deep in thought, you hardly notice the guide demanding that you pay for the information he's given you. Give him a scat if you wish, remember to cross it off, and then turn to chapter 414. Chapter 414. If you have not done so already, you can now attempt to make contact with Gaia. Turn to chapter 351. Research the legend of the Heart of Volant. Turn to chapter 91. Remember that if you possess a Vademecum, you can use Streetwise while in Venice. If you have completed all your business here and are ready to leave, turn to chapter 25. Chapter 350. The main market of Venice is located inside a lavish, three-decked galley perched incongruously amid the muddy lower streets. Here, on benches where rowers once plied gilded oars, merchants sit and call out their trade. When a customer shows interest, he is led off to the merchant's storehouse in one of the neighboring side streets. If you are interested in ordinary goods, turn to chapter 394. If you are looking for weaponry and other devices, turn to chapter 283. If you want to undergo genetic enhancement, turn to chapter 434. Chapter 394. Inspecting a range of items laid out on the market stalls, you haggle until the following prices are agreed. Rope, 2 scads. Lantern, 3 scads. Medical kit, 12 scads. Food packs, 2 scads each. Buy what you want, if anything, and amend your character sheet accordingly. Rope, 2 scads. Rope, 2 scads. Lantern, 3 scads. Medical kit. Rope, 2 scads. If you also want to buy or sell weaponry or other unusual items, turn to chapter 283. If you want to pay for genetic enhancement, turn to chapter 434. If you have finished with your shopping, turn either to chapter 414 if you have Streetwise or a Vademecum, or to chapter 25 if not. Chapter 414. If you have not done so already, Chapter 25. Bookmarked. Dawn hides behind a blanket of dark, snow-laden cloud. Huddled in warm furs, a group of travelers make their way to the quayside to await the ferry. As you approach the ticket kiosk, you see an old man propped like a limp sack on a bench, facing out to sea. He is crippled, having no legs, and his face has the look of a clay effigy that has crumpled in on itself through sheer age. A puff of white hair halos his liver-spotted pate. Poor old devil, you think as you pass him. He looks up. Keen Hawk's eyes meet your own. "I don't care for your pity, youngster," he snaps. "I'm sorry," you say. "I didn't mean..." And then it hits you. He can read your mind. Of course I can read your mind. Have you never heard of Baron Psoriasis? Before you can reply, he hauls himself to the edge of the bench. It seems to you that he's about to fall to the ground, and you take half a step forward, but he glares at you and says, "I don't need your help either." To your amazement, he rises into the air until he is hovering in front of you, his gaze level with yours. For a moment, your eyes lock. You hear his words of warning, not spoken, but burning their way into your mind. Don't go to Duan if you want to live. Abruptly, he turns and drifts away. A woman standing behind you in the queue glances after him and says, "That's Baron Psoriasis, one of the lords of Byzant. He's said to be the most powerful psionic alive." You have never before seen a man with enough psychokinetic power to levitate his own body. "Indeed, who can doubt it?" you reply. If you have the code word diamond, turn to chapter 224. If not, turn to chapter 202. Chapter 202. The queue shuffles along slowly, and at last you reach the ticket office. A bored official in the livery of a Venetian merchant guild peers at you through a screen of wire-meshed glass. The cost of passage as far as Kahira is 10 scads, he tells you. If you are able to pay this sum, cross it off your money and turn to chapter 246. If not, turn to chapter 288. Chapter 288. Delete the code word diamond if you have it. Perhaps one of your skills could help you secure a place on the ferry. If you have piloting and want to make use of it, turn to chapter 309. If you prefer to rely on roguery, turn to chapter 331. If you resort to cunning, turn to chapter 226. Chapter 309. You get talking to members of the relief crew who are waiting on the quayside for the ferry to arrive. After brief discussion of general matters, you turn the conversation onto the specifics of your profession. "I hear that the ferry is a Bauer Turbo 400 hovercraft," you say. "Such a machine handles well, particularly in the turbulent waters around the Isis Delta, but you must take care to power down slowly and maintain it at a reasonable temperature. Cooling too quickly risks damage to the skirt and can cause cracks in the jet housings." "You are a pilot or shipmaster?" asks a thin-whiskered man who introduces himself as the captain. "I have often navigated the inland sea, usually skirting the coast in a mud skimmer to avoid pirates, though I have handled a Bauer once or twice." The captain points the stem of his pipe at you and nods thoughtfully. "How would you be fixed for a trip to Kahira?" "As it happens, that is precisely where I wish to go," you say, shouldering your pack. "Well, if you're not afraid of hard work, then I think I can find a job for you on board." He goes on to discuss the details of employment. In addition to earning your passage to Kahira, you will be paid a further 20 scads. Add this sum to your money and then turn to chapter 246. Chapter 246. After 15 minutes, a pale green light flashes through the murk out to sea. The assembled travelers start to rise and gather their belongings as the ferry comes sweeping in towards the dock. A massive hovercraft of 3-tiered decks surmounted by a high conning tower, the ferry glides up the frosty foreshore and settles on its metal skirt. Workers immediately rush out with planks to assemble a boardwalk, and you go aboard with the others. There is a delay while supplies are loaded. You find a couch on the middle deck and gaze out to sea. A polarizing tint in the glass adds to the gloominess of the scene. with tall, iron-black clouds piled high above a sea of gray swell and ice floes. Eventually, the craft raises itself, and you are underway. Stewards come round and lunch is served at long curved tables in the central lounge. You chew at a stodgy gruel formulated from sea algae, washed down with spiced tea. You take a promenade of the outside deck, but the chill of the afternoon soon drives you back inside. Some of the other passengers have started card games. As the daylight fades, a gap in the lowering cloud reveals a handful of diamond-bright stars. The bar is opened and the atmosphere aboard gradually acquires a current of bonhomie, but you remain aloof and troubled. Most of these people have no further destination in mind than Kahira, no ambition beyond a small profit and a frisson of petty adventure. But your own goal is direly remote, the lost ruins of Duin in the far hinterland of the Saharan ice wastes. It seems impossible to believe, but there in Duin you will either grasp the ultimate power or perish. Turn to Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Bookmarked. At dawn, the ferry enters the Isis estuary and skims upriver towards Kahira. Taking a stroll on the deck, you notice a waft of warmth rising from the river. It eases the bitter chill of the morning air. Questioning one of the sailors, you learn that heating pipes are laid along the riverbed. No one knows the source of energy, but the effect is to keep the Isis from freezing, with the result that river plants and fish are more plentiful than you would expect. That is the basis of Kahira's prosperity, he tells you. But one day the pipes will fail, then the river will freeze, and Kahira must die. You glance to the east, where the sun struggles morosely behind a drape of stern gray cloud. That is the whole world's eventual fate. Kahira hoves into view around a bend in the river. It stands on massive concrete buttresses. Chapter Polarized goggles. The emblem of a Of course,